And look at that, we're live. Wasn't that quick? Sorry, we're a little
Hello,
late.
everyone. Welcome to Roll for
everybody.
Combat Live.
So yes, today, as everyone knows who watches the show on a regular basis, I have no idea what we're going to talk about, and not even Mark knows until like literally minutes before we go live. Basically, on Wednesday, I'm like, "What is the topic we're going to talk about?" But this topic that we're going to get into in a little while was kind of shocking because I probably, if there's a YouTube channel that talks about D&D or Pathfinder or role-playing games, I pretty much subscribe to it. And a big thumbnail came up on my YouTube feed a couple of days ago that basically said I'm retiring from actually, I don't know if it was Man Shorts or How to Be a Great GM came up first, but basically like, goodbye, see you. And sometimes you see those, and sometimes those are jokes. Every so often you'll see that. And of course, those are the ones that do really well. But, How to Be a Great GM has 238,000 subscribers. I mean, that is a lot. Okay, 200,000 is insane. And he's like, I'm leaving because I can't do this anymore. And then Man Shorts, who actually is a friend of the channel, he did some content he actually did the Eldamon video for us. And he also is quitting, and this was in the same day, and he has 175,000 subscribers. So I was like, oh my God, what's going on here? But this actually has been going on quietly in the background all year because revenues have been down. I had a meeting yesterday that had nothing to do with this, and we were talking about video games, the video game segments, and believe it or not, the exact same thing is happening in the video game world. And then I was talking about another segment, and it's happening there. It's actually happening in other segments that are not just, the RPG industry, TTRPG. So this is a little distressing, but I'm here to probably help discuss it, see what you can do about it, explain why it's happening and why this has happened in the past and will happen in the future, and that this is just a cyclical thing, and unfortunately, it's just the way of life in the world of media, that nothing lasts forever, and we're going to work, unfortunately, on the downside of this. But before we get into all that, we got a special guest, someone brand new to the show, who's never been on the show, ever, not even once, who didn't even know who we were, but now he does. Hey, it's Esper the Bard, who has a pretty big YouTube channel, and he does some pretty cool stuff. Why don't you just say hi to everyone? Say what you do, because I know you.
Hey, everybody.
You do a lot of stuff, actually.
Yeah, I do a lot of things. My channel is called Esper the Bard. Started in August of 2009.
Oh my God!
And I started because there were no D&D channels, and I was really into D&D and role-playing games, and I always have been into role-playing games and adventure stories and world building. So started my channel, and there was no template, there was no format, and YouTube was a very different animal back in those days. It was really just kind of rudimentary people being silly. And I'm still going. So here I am. I've been doing it for 15 years. A lot of D&D based videos, role-playing game videos, lore, RPG advice, and really my favorite things are creation. I create books. I make D&D compatible books. I develop campaign settings, create content. I love running adventures. I love running D&D campaigns. I love GMing. So yeah, writer, artist, game designer, YouTuber, guy with too many irons in the fire.
Like all of us.
You have no idea.
This is my calling. This is what I was born to do. And I hope to publish novels before too long as well.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, if I had my dream set up, it would be publishing novels and publishing RPG modules or an RPG system, and running adventures and running campaigns.
So if you could have like the Cosmere RPG and the Sanderson verse, that would be your dream. Obviously, that's not something that just anybody can do. It requires a ton of work, effort, and success over the years. But like that's that kind of empire is what like is the pinnacle of what you're looking at.
That's what you would say I'm aiming for. And maybe there's even something beyond that I'm aiming for, but it's maybe more abstract. It's something more like, if I don't contribute and give everything that I have to give to the RPG sphere and to the world, then I'm going to have this like terrible regret that I didn't fulfill my life purpose. And that's like terrifying. That's my hell right there. So I'm trying to avoid that.
Well, I mean, you've been doing this a long time. So
yeah, when you were talking about the people having to sign off and the channels unfortunately waning, my channel has essentially died a few times before, and I've had to resuscitate it. And somehow, thank God, I've been able to bring it back to life. And it does involve some reinventing of yourself and trying new things. The channel is in something of a sort of a death spiral right now. It's weird. It's not a total death spiral. It's like a unstable, I would say. It's an unstable place, a very unstable place, erratic, roller coastery.
Yeah.
How did you revive it the other times, do you think? When these other channels aren't being able to do that?
Yeah. Pioneering something new. Like I'm always experimenting with different kinds of videos, always. And then eventually a good enough idea happens, and it happens at the right time, and enough people like it that, things sync up and it has some success. And then that turns into like a wave, and you're like, let's ride this wave. Oh gosh. And you try to ride it as long as you can. So I would say right now I'm at the moment where I'm not, it's not waiting for a wave, because it's not a passive thing. It's more like adventuring out. You're adventuring out and trying to gather resources and develop. It's in a resource gathering, developing phase. And I'll have new stuff coming out. I always do. I have a new series that'll be coming out pretty soon. Professor DM and Baron Drop both just agreed to be a part of it, to play in it.
So, really?
Nice.
How about that for some development and gathering?
No, that's good.
Yeah.
I know Baron well, and obviously Professor. So yeah, Baron and Professor and I and Kelsey and who else is going to be there? Ben Milton. A billion people are going to be at Page next week. So if anyone's going to go to Page in Philly, it's right outside Philly. It's only the second year, and I think 10% of the conference is guests, which is nuts. And I think
I went to the homepage, and was scrolling through the list of special guests. So very special.
It's insane. Special. I don't even know how we did this. We went last year because it's right near us, me and Professor, and Bob World Builder's going. We convinced him and his wife, Grace World Destroyer, to go, and last year we went, and at first, because it's only like 1,000 people, it's really small, and we were like, oh, I was like, how is it? He goes, Dan, Professor Dungeon Master was like, oh, I think I'm going to get a lot of writing done because there wasn't anything going on. But once it started, it actually was really good. Like Frank Menser was there, and it just was really good. It was a fun convention, really small, kind of like conventions of old. Like conventions used to be like 30 years ago as opposed to now. And I don't know how he got so many people. And then another good thing is there's very few conventions on the East Coast. There's really this and PAX Unplugged, and that's kind of it. PAX East is more video games, and they're really, and the other ones are Comic-Cons. So, and then just, I don't know. And then I bugged Kelsey to go, and she eventually I wore her down, and she's like, all right, I'm going. And so now Kelsey's going to be there, and it's like everyone's going. So it's going to be a good convention. But, yeah, that sounds great. Because you did a video yesterday that I saw where you basically said, please get in touch with me, Professor, and I guess they did. Or you got in touch with them, or you got in touch with each other if you're doing
I had a conversation with him today, and then he put me in touch with Baron, and I had a conversation with Baron like just now. Like I went from his call to this one here.
Oh, that's funny.
And really great conversations. We talked about lots of different things. some of the struggles and challenges that I've been facing, the history of my channel, projects I have currently going on. They gave me some advice. I talked about some of my worries and concerns as I am going to venture a little bit more into some current topics, spicy issues, controversial figures, somewhat political things, and try to not fall into a pit trap as I do so. We shared stories. We laughed a lot. They were great conversations. I'm so happy that that I don't know what happened there.
Because there's not that many of us. That's
built
why.
up enough good graces over the years that they decided to take some time out of their day to talk with me.
Well, as I was saying, there's like basically it was fascinating because this is also 2 years since the OGL, Mark. And if you realize that it's almost, I think, to the day.
Yeah, life is flying by.
A few days after the 2-day anniversary of at least when we got our leak, and then Gizmodo published the article the next day.
Right. And really it was interesting because everyone, all the YouTubers, I think, were kind of, because I was doing the show for a while, and I was always trying to get in touch with other people, and everyone was a little, I wouldn't say standoffish, but I would think protective of their little sphere, and no one wanted to, I guess, I don't know, they just sort of were, it was hard for me to get in touch with other people before this. But then once the OGL came around, and we were all talking to each other, and like Professor discovered me and I talked to him, and like we all discovered each other. And then I make it a kind of a big effort to try to A, bring people on the show so we all meet each other, and B, when we go to Gen Con or other conventions, we all hang out with each other, because there's power in knowing each other and knowing like how each other does things so that they help each other survive. And now we have, Gen Con, like 2 years ago, there was a group of like 10 of us walking around, and then like last year, there was like 25 of us walking around. So it just is getting growing and growing. Like we're just like all the YouTubers are hanging out with each other because we're not against each other, and there's no reason for us not to be friendly with each other. And even you, I reached out to you just yesterday. I was like, oh, why not? I mean, now I know you, and you know me, and
Yeah, the camaraderie and sharing ideas, bouncing ideas off each other, brainstorming together, encouraging each other. It's fantastic. I've had the privilege of getting to know some different YouTubers over the years, but not as many as I would like, and probably not as many as I should have. And I'm sitting here scratching my head, like, why? Even my wife said this. She's like, why haven't you like reached out to these guys already? And I'm like, I don't know. My head's been stuck up my ass for years. So like I'm doing it now. Okay. So I'm a late bloomer. I'm a late bloomer, late to the party.
To be fair, most people, it's not something a lot of people do. People like to stay in their lanes. Some people, I never shut up, and Mark knows this. Like I try to make as many connections with as many people as possible. And that's just that's just in my DNA. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
there's something great about that. About those the human. This is gonna sound wrong. The human resources. What I mean by that is the information we can share with each other, and the courage that we can instill into each other, and the trust that we can earn. Like that is such a valuable resource to have. You can rely on that when times get hard, when times are great. You can share in the bounty together. You can celebrate together. That's life right there, man. That's life abundant. That's the momentum going forward, instead of just cloistering in your own little hobbit hole, and who knows what's going to happen to you there.
It's easy to cloister up in your hobbit hole, but it really is true that everybody, especially in a niche or smaller topic like tabletop role-playing games, we're all allies who are making our channels together. And even if you look at what the algorithm does, it's not pitting us against each other. Really, I find that if somebody does almost the same topic as me or as one of my popular videos, I get a surge in views of my video that if I then go and like, why did I get so many views this day? I'll try to look on that day. It'll be like, oh, 30% of it was that you were recommended by this other person's video. And
people say that in the comments too. They'll say, oh, I've never heard of you before, but I found you because I watched so-and-so's video.
Yeah. And so
I love that. I love that sense like that. Oh, I put some spark out there and that motivated people. And then they went on and created something or found another channel that was great, whatever it might be. They went and did something.
It's all interconnected. If we stay in our own little bubble away from everyone else, that's just, we might get crushed and killed by the algorithm, just like some of these other channels. But if we're interconnected, it actually helps to survive some of these things. That helps do the innovation that you were talking about rather than the iteration where we're just kind of doing our same thing over and over again as it goes down.
Oh, you just made me think of something that I wanted to ask you. So, like, I literally just learned like 10 seconds before we went live that you are one of the creators of Pathfinder 2, the designers. Yes. So that's an honor to be speaking to you. I have a question for you. So I want to do my next big project within like 2 years. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. I'll show you my last project real quick. Here's the last one I did. Monstrous Heroes.
That's cool.
5th edition book, 5th edition compatible, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Monster classes. Play a Minotaur, play a Ogre, play a Revenant, a Vampire. There's 17 classes. They're race classes. 17 race classes in there. Okay. So that was a lot of work, but it wasn't like this complicated mess because I'm so fluent and experienced and plugged in with 5e. Like that's my jam. That's what I do. So it was just doing the work. It wasn't, how do I build a whole RPG system from the ground up? Okay. So now I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, I want to do my next big thing. What's it going to be? Is it going to be another 5e book? Or is it going to be, okay, I'm going to make a RPG. It's, the 5e game engine is its core. Like that's the skeleton that drives it, even though it's like I do the classes, I do the spells, everything is kind of built up. So it's 5e compatible enough. You could run your 5e characters through it and it'll work fine. The math is still the same, but it's like its own thing. Or do I try to innovate, make my own game engine completely, design my complete own system? Do I make it kind of generally similar in a very rough way to D&D? Or do I try to go super innovative and try to do something that like no one's ever seen it done that way before? How do you make that decision? Like eventually you have to decide.
It's a very difficult decision, and it kind of depends on what you want to get out of it. Because ultimately, trying to create a fantasy RPG that like kind of lives in the same space as Dungeons and Dragons, if you're trying to make a big one, it's kind of the name for that is typically called a heartbreaker because it usually is going to break your heart. And so if you're making it for yourself and you want to put your innovation out there and you don't care how well it does, then probably the innovative one is going to be something that afterward you can feel like, I really innovated in this space. But it might just be on itch.io and only like this small crowd is like, this was really a good innovative cult classic, but it only sold, a few copies total. Whereas if it's very based on things that people recognize from D&D, maybe it has more of a chance to be noticed more in a wider audience, but maybe then you won't feel like you innovated as much in the end. And if you make something that just is for D&D, well, there's a crowded market of that. But if you have people who are currently your customers from before, and they're like, wow, we know Esper made those monster classes, we like them. We still play 5e because that's what we were playing before. Then you might have those repeat customers who are like, okay, now that Esper has made I don't know, maybe psychic bards, the book for psychic Esper bards, then I'll check that out because I like the monster class. So you have to weigh like what you're interested in, because what you're passionate in, sort of what makes you feel like, yes, this is exciting, this is different, is where you're going to put in your best work. But it might also economically not be where you're going to sell the most copies.
That's super tricky. So, just quickly bouncing this off of Stephen, hypothetically speaking, what if I do make a brand new system and it's attempts to be highly innovative and I believe in it, and I somehow convince or entice people to invest in this game for the marketing and production and distribution, the whole business side of it. Do you think that having like the business piece really solid and the game being a solid enough game, like that's enough for me to roll the dice and take the gamble? It seems like a stupid question, but I have to ask stupid questions because that business side is so underdeveloped in me.
All right, so the business side, what's happening right now in the industry, there's actually something fascinating, is that there's a whole bunch of these flavors of D&D coming out. So right now there's Level Up, which is basically a flavor of D&D. There's Tales from the Valiant, which is basically a flavor of D&D. I forgot, there's like a few more, but they are basically, they're not rewriting the book. They actually work with existing D&D, but they're their own settings. They're basically what Paizo did with Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like they basically did a branch off D&D. And they work with the D&D rules. They work with the D&D. You know, you have to futz around with them a little. And that's what some of the big people have been doing. The reasons you do that is because it's a lot easier to sell it to people. It's a lot easier of a lift. You don't have to do as much. You don't have to worry about, because if you launch a new product, you actually have to launch a lot. You actually have to launch the game. You have to launch adventures with it, even baby ones. You usually have to launch some monsters with it. You have to launch a player's book and a GM book. So it's not like, oh, I came up with a game. It's like, well, that's only one of like 5 products. You actually need a lot to support it. And if you look at a very popular like Shadow Dark, well, when Shadow Dark launched, Kelsey did a very smart thing. First of all, her rule set is very small and very light. And that's basically an OSR derivative, but it's her own. Mm-hmm. Inside the rule book is everything you need to be a player and a GM, and it has hundreds of monsters. And she came out with dungeons with the Kickstarter, and a lot of them are one-page dungeons. So everything I just described, she did, and it came out, and that's actually why it hit the ground running. But she also tested it for years at conventions and iterated on it for a long time. And then DC20, he did the same thing. If you want to go down the Dungeon Coach route, he's been iterating and testing his on his Patreon. So those were new systems that seemed like they were overnight successes, but it's one of my favorite quotes from Steve Jobs. It's like, overnight successes don't happen overnight. And he was talking about Pixar, because everyone thinks Pixar happened on it. It did not. And it took years. And that's the thing. Like, if you want to go down this route, that's great. It's going to take you 3 to 5 years. I mean, I'm just telling you right now. It's not going to be something you could do fast. So
yeah,
I would say...
when I say 2 years, I'm being unrealistic, you would say.
Yeah, no way. I mean...
Unless it's something like this. I could do something like this in 2 years, because...
Yes.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
For sure. But that's a supplement. That's not a system.
It's D&D compatible.
Right, that's a supplement.
Or I could do like a campaign setting.
Yeah, which is a supplement.
It's the campaign supplement.
Right,
okay. Yeah.
So think of it this way. There's like the supplements, which is what we do. And to be honest, I don't want to make another... Like, people are asking, you guys going to do another game? No, we're not. I don't want to, and I don't think Mark does
Games
either.
are hard to make, man.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of fun
Games are
playing.
really hard to make.
Well, we have
it's
a different,
very complex.
Yeah, we don't have to tell me. I think Mark already hit it out of the park with Pathfinder, so we don't need to do another one. So I'm done. I don't think we could. I think all we could do is iterate
We're not
on
having
it.
another baby, honey.
Right. We're not having another. No Pathfinder 3. No. But I also prefer playing in other people's sandboxes and iterating off of them. So that's what I like to do. And coming up with crazy ideas and pushing the envelope within the existing systems. I find that more challenging and fun personally. So that's us. And the advantage of that is, like, from a business point of view, it's like we do work in Pathfinder and D&D, and now we're doing Shadowdark. Well, we don't have to worry about the systems. We just have to put out books that people can use and find interesting within those systems. So that's like the lowest rung. The next rung is obviously if you're going to do a branch of D&D, or the other one is old school essentials. So a lot of people do old schools essential branches. Dolanwood is basically a branch of that. I just got the Painted Wastelands, which is kind of a branch of old school essentials. You know, old school essentials is the other one that's very popular that people do branches off of. And then finally it's coming out with your own game, and it's really hard. I mean, like, you could do, it's like DCC did it, and DCC did it because D&D 4th edition came out, and it was because of necessity with Goodman. You obviously have Kelsey did it because she was testing her game forever and she just wanted to do it. You have Dungeon Coach, who also did the same thing. You know, the people who came out with their own games really wanted to come out with their own games and felt like that's what drew them, and it pushed them. Like, they didn't do it saying, oh, I'm going to come with the game and make $1 million. Like, Kelsey and I were talking, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this. She said she thought maybe she would make $10,000, you know, and she would have been happy with that.
Was that her funding goal? Was 10,000?
Something like that. And she made 1.4 million. So, you know, you know, and
we could call that a success.
You're right. She had no idea. And Dungeon Coach too, you know, he thought, well, if I do 100,000 or something, he'd be happy. He did like 2.5 million, you know, so, or 2.2 million. Sorry. Yeah, I mean,
tell me about Dungeon Coach. You quickly summarized Shadowdark. Tell me about Dungeon Coach's game.
Well,
Do you have a blurb for that?
DC 20 is fascinating because Dungeon Coach is really young, and it's interesting from a design point of view because he is coming from it he's new to the hobby, and he's coming up with all these ideas which are really kind of been used in other systems, but he's putting them, it's like almost a recipe, but he's putting them together in a way that no one ever did before, so it's kind of making a new game. Like, in
some cases he did not play those
right.
previous systems, so he didn't even know that they were in there.
Right, he didn't even know. So, like, he has a 4-action economy instead of a 3-action economy. Okay, you know, it's just, I guess it works. You know, I actually haven't.
Well, so he said he knew about that one, right?
He
said he looked at Pathfinder 2. There are many similarities, but there's also a lot of things that were in 4th edition D&D.
Yes, there's a lot in 4th
done differently. In some cases, I like his version better than the 4E version, for example, and he just did not know that because he didn't know 4th edition. But it turned out it's just parallel design.
Yeah.
This kind of thing happens all the time in tabletop RPGs where you wind up with parallel design.
There's only so many different things you can do. It's like music. I mean, there's only so many chords, strings, scales, ways you can arrange things. Now you can innovate in certain unique ways, and that's fantastic. But at the end of the day, there's only so many notes out there.
Yeah. And there's always going to be coincidences like that. Like, we made monster classes for Dragon in 5e. Like, and that's similar to what you were doing. We've got stuff like that.
We have
here's another one. We made a Year of Titans where we decided to
same book. It's a little different, but we also came out with monster ancestries that you can play.
We made a Year of Titans for this year where we decided to expand the use of Titans to not just be those ancient Greek looking gods, but like all sorts of giant beasts and kaiju and things like that. And then D&D has announced that they're expanding the use of Titans to do that. And it's completely unrelated. Nobody on either side of the thing knew that was going to happen, but it got announced right near each other just randomly. Or there was a circus adventure in D&D and Pathfinder right near each other. People were like, somebody, I think Pathfinder announced first that they must have been looking at it. It's like, no. Right. They're too close. They couldn't have been looking at it. They would have had to be in planning so far in advance.
They also did schools of magic adventures right next to each other. It's like that happens all the time. It's weird.
How about this one? I announced and started producing live streams and YouTube content for my D&D world of Ikoria in the beginning of 2018. Then 1 year later was the Coast releases their new Magic plane, Ikoria.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that based on how long they spin up, that they probably couldn't have possibly gotten it from you. Although maybe the name was something they could change later in the process. Names theoretically, obviously, there's almost no chance that they did. But
I made a video speculating about it.
So someone's saying the super chats aren't working. It's
fun to speculate. It's just that it doesn't really happen
the
that way.
OGL getting leaked and the verbiage in there saying we can use independent creators content.
We don't want to go down that.
Defend themselves against legal claims from people who had a coincidental happenstance.
By the way, so I'm looking at the chats. By the way, any questions, feel free to do a like, do a subscribe. Our subscriptions are actually going down. I actually know why. I know why. I actually don't mind because I know why. That's the other thing. Like, I'm not freaking out. Our subscriptions are down because if I don't juice the well, if I don't put in a spicy content every so often, it literally makes it actually will spike my subscriptions. And then it goes right back down because the people who come to this channel are our core audience, and the ones who leave are not my core audience. And you 226 people we have here live are the core audience. Congratulations. You are here to see. By the way, a lot of people are very happy to see you here.
We got a member chat from Agile Monk that said, glad to have Esper here. What a great guy and true bard. And Mark T said a 199 super chat that said, just testing.
Yes, juice the well. I know, that was a bad one.
Agile Monk 999 said, here's to Esper, Mark, and Steven.
I don't know what I was trying to say there, but that's why you come here, because who the hell knows? Last week we were talking about Babylon 5 for half an hour, and people loved it. I couldn't get enough.
It was a very interesting conversation about Babylon 5, despite the fact that the topic was not about Babylon 5.
I thought last week, that was one of our best shows. I think that was the best show of 2025. Because I've only been 3 shows so far. We're not actually talking about the main topic, but that's okay because people seem to be interested, and we're here to help you, Esper. If you have any of these suggestions, or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to help you. But that's really it.
I would have a bunch of questions for both you guys. I think especially Mark, since the game design is just such a big interest of mine.
Sure,
something that I'm really plugged into.
Well, why don't we get a little bit into the topic, and then we can get to some of your questions, because I do want to talk about what is going on, and actually it can help you too, because I'm going to go through reasons I think that's happening with these YouTubers. And
right, because you mentioned it was on a downswing, but you didn't mention why. Why do you think it's on a downswing? Tim, what caused this downswing?
Well, so there's an old saying in marketing is that everything is on a curve, and whenever you're going up, things are great. Then I'm always thinking, just remember, there's always a downside to a curve, and you're going to hit it one day, sooner or later. And curves go up and they go back down. And right now,
so are you saying this was a bubble based on the OGL scandal that caused people to be paying more attention to news?
It was kind of a perfect timing, because 2 years ago, and we were there and we saw it, is that and a lot of the Dungeon tubers that I've been talking to, they all got massive spikes. We did too. The OGL exploded at the absolute perfect time. There was nothing going on. It was very quiet. D&D was, everyone knew they were releasing a new edition, and then all of a sudden the OGL came out, and there was so much. I mean, at one time, our record, we had 8,000 people on this stream once live.
I think it was over 9,000 very briefly, because it was the day that was rumored that they were going to post their update. They never did.
Yes.
That Wizards was going to. And so everyone came because not only was it broadly rumored they were going to post their update, but people knew that we had like the contract lawyer on. We've been analyzing things. Yeah. And they also thought that it was even more likely it was going to happen because Steven's sources were saying that they saw the video.
Yeah, I have I have a lot of sources, and my source was they shot a video and it was ready to go, and then they pulled it the last second.
Yep. So that was shocking to have over 9,000 people live in a.
And you know what? It raised all ships. So everyone got a big insurge, and then the new version came out, and there was a lot of interest in the new version. And then, not to get political, the election really sucked the air out of YouTube, Facebook, everywhere, because all the ad buys were being taken up by the election. And this actually happens every 4 years. So the way it works is there's a certain number of slots, and you bid on the slots, and then those slots go to, the people who bid on them. They were all being taken up by basically presidential and local candidates. And it just, whenever there's a presidential election, it kind of messes up the ad revenue. And that's not just for us, it's everywhere. And I was talking to even, like, we work with ad agencies, and they were just like, yeah, because I was doing ad buys and they were not doing great. And they're like, yeah, it's just because there's nothing to buy. It's all like, all the inventory's gone. There actually is inventory. And it's not the same. There's almost endless inventory. Like in the old days when you literally had radio and TV, there literally was inventory because there's so many hours in a day. And if it was gone, it was gone. But obviously with YouTube and Facebook, there's almost limitless inventory. But believe it or not, even they run out. Even they will like push you down. And then even the type of content that was coming up on channels was different. It was more related to politics or, I don't know, Taylor Swift, whatever's going on right then and there. The new D&D content came, it kind of went, and now we're back on a downturn. It's like the content on D&D is died down. There's really not as many controversies. The channels that got this huge influx of people, I don't know if they expected that to stay the same, but maybe they did. Maybe they were already, I'm faking numbers here. Say you were at 20,000, and then through OGL, you got all the way up to 70,000. And you're like, that's great. I'm going to stay at 70,000. And the problem is that your subscriptions can stay at 70,000, but your views can go down because people don't unsubscribe. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, why are my views going down? I have 70,000 subscribers. Like these channels I mentioned, like Man Shorts, has 175,000, subscribers. He would struggle to get 10,000 views. How to Be a Great GM, same thing. They're really struggling.
Brutal. Yeah.
Yeah, it was brutal. And that's just because times change. Interests change, and right now there's nothing driving D&D content other than the love of the game. And so the ones that do well, and Professor and I talk about this all the time, and I did that thumbnail today as a kind of a joke, clickbait works. I hate to say it, it does. And if you don't believe me, look up clickbait, and the first one we'll talk about clickbait is Mr. Beast. And he will go on explaining in detail how and why it works. And people are like, I hate clickbait. I hate clickbait. Really? Well, guess what? That's what works. So, and this happens all the time. And this is one of the most commonly seen things in media and market research is what people say is not what people do.
That's true. That's very true.
It's been proven 1,000 times. I can't even, like, the famous one is the Pepsi challenge. And there's a lot been written on that. And that's when I brought this up on the channel before, where people would be like, oh, do you like Coke or Pepsi? And then they would be blind tested. This was in the early 80s when I was a kid. And then they would say what they liked. And everyone, like, Everyone's like, oh, do you like Coke and Pepsi? And something like 90% of people always said Coke. But then when they did the taste test, it would be like 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
I
literally...
remember those TV commercials.
Yeah, the TV commercials.
Which, I mean, those... That was like late 80s or early 90s?
Yeah, it was actually early
Something
to
like
mid
that.
80s when they were doing the Pepsi challenge when I was a kid.
I remember those being on TV.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that people would disagree. They would say, well, do you like Coke or Pepsi? I'm like, I like Coke. And then they'll be like, oh, well, you pick Pepsi. And they're like, well, I'm wrong. I like Coke. I'm like, what do you mean you're wrong? Like, it's cognitive dissonance. Like, they can't even like it. In fact, it makes them dig in their heels more. Jordan with the PH of Silent said Veritisium YouTube channel is fantastic, and I love that channel, by the way. Definitely check that one out, and he explains why clickbait works as well. There's a lot of science fiction. No, there's a lot of science on why clickbaiting works, and
science about fiction.
Yeah, science about fiction. There we go.
Science of fiction. I did.
Speaking of science or unscience, there was a super chat from Greg that said unscientific, lots of 5e books at half price.
Well,
I did something of an experiment on this topic recently.
Yeah, that's some of the older ones.
I did a Kickstarter, a kind of smaller scale Kickstarter for an adventure module of mine. Did the Kickstarter a couple months ago for the module Eldritch Castle, a series that I previously ran on my YouTube channel. And then I turned it into a full-on module, and I launched this Kickstarter. Now, before I launched the Kickstarter, I made a post on YouTube asking people, I'm considering running a Kickstarter to fund a 5e module of Eldritch Castle, the series you might have seen here on the channel. Which would you realistically be interested in backing? The physical book, the PDF, or no thanks? And got a response of approximately 350 people who said that they were interested in it, in whether the physical or the digital one. 350 people said they wanted to get it. Those 350 people did not show up to the Kickstarter. A few of them did, but not many at all. Like, not even 10% of them. And I'm like, well, what happened there? Maybe that's just a difference between, it's easy enough just to click on a survey. All you do is click a button, but actually expecting people to fully go on to the Kickstarter and back it, well, that's a whole other ball of wax. So, I should just adjust my expectations. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. That's a good point. Well, how about I do a second part to the experiment? We're like 3 days away from the end of the campaign on Kickstarter, and I make another post saying, hey, the Kickstarter is going to be closing in 3 days. I know a lot of you said you were interested in joining. Are you? Another survey. Thanks for reminding me. I'm going to go back it now. I'm planning on backing it here soon, or, no thanks. Not right now. And even then, I still got like a couple hundred people saying, "Oh yeah, great. I'm going to go back it," and they still didn't do it. And it really made me scratch my head. And I think it's very much what you just mentioned there. What people say versus what people do can be opposite things.
Yeah,
would you say that people's behavior is a greater indicator of truth versus people's words?
Yes, 100%. I mean, and unfortunately, what's really happened, it's fascinating, because when I started in marketing, I started in the early 90s, before the internet and algorithms took over the world. And it was mostly about, and if you're into baseball, this actually even happened in baseball, it's happening in sports. And if you watch the movie Moneyball, they touch on this. It's like people would do things based on gut. They do things based on feel. And I would be in these meetings, and these are like Saatchi, Gray, some of the biggest advertising agencies in the world. And they would be like, I'd be like, why did this succeed? And these guys are, I'm like literally the president of like Saatchi and Gray. And they'd be like, we have no idea. Like they had no idea. They're like, we don't know. And they just didn't. They're just, sometimes they succeed and sometimes they wouldn't. And it was literally just constant shots in the dark.
And the same thing with YouTube videos.
Yeah.
You can spend a whole week's worth of full-time work producing your best video ever. And it's so like edited and like amazing, and then 2,000 people watch it, and then you can just like off the cuff record a 5-minute thing and it takes you like 1 hour to produce it, and it's getting 100,000 views.
Yeah. And so now,
Why?
why? Well, they've been
Because.
YouTube
Because.
and Google, well, they're getting very good, and especially Facebook. That was the secret of Facebook, is that they are able to basically gamify humans and figure out exactly how to target them perfectly. And it's really kind of depressing that it's like humans really, when they come down to it, can be gamified and can be predetermined on behavior if you know what you're doing. And unfortunately, marketing is very different now. Marketing is all analytics based, and it's all based on segments and being able to figure out where your audiences are and where your locations are. And things like Facebook is that if I wanted to segment out and advertise to someone who lives in one town in the United States, you can. In the old days, you couldn't do that. So by having this discrete versioning of every aspect of your life, it is unfortunately made it very tough for people who don't play the game and actually gamify their channels and their systems and their views to not succeed. Now, this only happens as you get higher up. See, that's the trick, is that at low levels, when you're getting 1,000, 5,000 subscribers, that's nothing. Okay. I mean, seriously, it doesn't sound like it's really not that many to YouTube. It's garbage. But once you start getting to the 100,000, there's a reason why YouTube gives you a plaque at 100,000, because that's like the magic number where you start becoming someone they pay attention to. And then obviously, once you get to over 100,000, they will pay attention. And by the way, they did talk about this, how to be a great GM. YouTube does have offices throughout the country, like in New York and London and all these places.
That was one of the most surprising parts of that whole video.
I actually knew about that. You can meet with them, and they have offices, and they used to have studios you could use and resources, and they will help you grow your channel and give you guidance. And I think it used to be as little as 20,000. I don't know what it is now, but you just don't need that many. Alex saying small content creators are nothing. Not to me, to YouTube, because we are aggregates. Okay, I deal with security for big companies, and they're always like worried, like, oh, people are going to steal my info, and I'm like, well, these people, they are, because they're actually important people. But for the mass majority of people, no one gives a crap about you. I hate to say it. You're nothing. You're an aggregate. Okay, you are part of a huge well of people whose identities get stolen or information gets stolen. Unless you're a very specific person, you are just not going to be targeted. It's very...
I know that from YouTube's perspective, that's true, and that Steven wasn't saying that from his perspective.
No,
I mean, my channel has 1,600 or so subscribers. It's nothing to YouTube.
Yeah.
Barely even a like an affiliate or a partner or whatever, YouTube partner at that size.
Yeah. By the way, we did have a super chat. I just want to get back because that was for...
Oh, I thought
Esper.
Oh, no, there's another one from Agile Monk that says, Esper, I have your Monstrous Heroes and Emporium of Esoterica in hardcover. I've done my best to support you as you are an excellent creator, it says.
I love how Mark even reads the mistype.
Thank you, Agile Monk. I very much appreciate your words of encouragement, and also that you picked up my books, and I hope you're getting a lot out of them. I designed them to just be overflowing with ideas and inspiration, and to just have almost infinite replay value.
So the one thing I wanted to say is that I was taking a look at some of the big channels that still do well and actually been growing. And you have Bob World Builder, who's continuously growing. You have Professor Dungeon Master, who's actually growing quite well. There's a few more out there, but I would even say Ronald the Rules Lawyer. He's actually been doing really well. His channel's growing quite a bit. Ben Milton, his channel, Questing Beasts, has been growing pretty well. And the one thing about their channels is, I mean, it's easier said than done, is first, they actually produce content that people want to see, which is so weird. It's like, what do you mean? How do you do that? Aren't I? Like, you're not. If there's a difference between content that you want and content that people want to see. And I forgot the most important thing is, for your channel, you need to know your audience. So there's going to be a certain type of person who watches your channel, and then you have to create the content for your audience that they want to see. And if you do, then they will continuously show up. So that's the first thing, because people will sometimes create content on things they're interested in, but maybe your subscribers are not. And that's kind of important. The other thing is that you have to constantly reinvent yourself. And we were talking before this, and the closest analogy I came up with was musicians. Because musicians are very similar to YouTubers, that they basically are their own thing. They can self-publish now if they want, especially in this day and age. And if you look at some of the big ones, and Professor DM said this, like I was just reading an article about this, how Katy Perry, who like 10 years ago was on top of the charts, on top of the world, and she's really been struggling lately. And it's just because her music is, she hasn't reinvented herself, and people want different types of music over time. And we're talking about someone who actually, David Bowie is a perfect example. He reinvented himself constantly. A good example of someone who's been reinventing themselves quite a bit, who somehow is still relevant, is Aerosmith is one. And they've been around forever. I think they're finally doing their farewell tour. I mean, they've been like 50 years, which is insane. Obviously, the Rolling Stones have been around still, which is mind-boggling because they've been around since the 50s. And you even have people like Elton John. And these are people who changed the type of music and their audiences based on not necessarily what they wanted to do, but based on what the market was requiring.
Mm-hmm. It's very rare to see a band or a solo artist who has managed to keep producing albums over a long stretch of many years and also maintains the quality, like their music is still good. It's pretty rare. Yeah, it's that is vastly the exception. I'm trying to think of some bands. Mastodon.
Oh, Mastodon! Wow. That's a rare one.
Golgathor mentioned Weird Al.
Well,
someone.
Okay. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
You guys talk. I'm gonna get something. You guys won't believe this.
Okay. I don't believe it, but Steven, you asked me to talk on a topic where we were naming bands. That is like the last thing that you could have me talk about. I can read what they said in chat, but I'm not gonna be able to name any. Esper, can you help?
Radiohead's another one I might put there. Kind of Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Okay, I know it seems like I've done everything and no one believes me, but guess what? Are you ready? Gotta wipe off the dust. So when I used to work at MTV, Weird Al came on Hanging with MTV and he did it a live performance, and then he smashed the guitar, and I grabbed the guitar and he signed it for me. And if he says, "To my dear close personal friend Steven, Weird Al Yankovic." I love Weird Al so much. You can tell he's a good close friend because he spelled my name wrong. But
yes, that's right. You can see how close we
are all together.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyhow,
I still will watch his music videos from time to time.
Oh, he's the OG, man. Dr. Demento's the OG. He's the second G, but yes. But
I used to listen to the Dr. Demento show way back in like the mid 90s.
Yeah. Weird Al movie. Oh yeah, that I love that movie is what's it, VHS is so,
it's numbers and letters.
Yeah, is so good. I love that show. Anyhow, I did just saw Weird Al recently. I saw him on his meet and greet tour. So yes, there's my. Did you know that one? Did you see this one, Mark? Mark is. I'm always showing weird things on this channel, but yes, there's my other thing.
I don't think you've shown me the Weird Al guitar before.
There you go.
I'm not surprised because you know a lot of people in the entertainment industry. I knew you worked on MTV from your many stories about it, but I did not know you had the Weird Al piece of the guitar he smashed.
Yes. So
that is legitimately a weird thing.
That is a weird thing, yes. Well, I was so excited, and you're not supposed to do that when you're working there, because you're not supposed to get, like, I met a lot of bands, and he was the only one I asked for an autograph. You're not supposed to do that, because I work there. I was like, I can't resist, it's Weird Al! I'm like, I must get you, and he did it, so it was nice. He was the nicest guy in the world. Couldn't be any nicer. Anyhow, what the point is that what is common with those bands, especially Aerosmith, is they sold out. I hate to say that. And none of them seem to regret it. In fact, if you watch any car commercial, whose music is on those car commercials? The Who, Snoop Dogg, Rolling Stones, Aerosmith. You know what? They have to give approval for those. Those don't just happen. They basically buy the rights to the music to use them on those commercials, and they have to say yes. And you know what? A lot of people will say no. Trust me. They'll go out to people and say, "Oh, can we use your music?" And even if they're a movie, they have to say that, and they'll be like,
sure.
"No," and they don't sell out. Now you can call it selling out, or you could call it staying relevant. You call it whatever you want, but they're still around. So, and that's something that Professor Dungeon Master said and was getting at in his video a couple weeks ago, is doing clickbait and talking about topics in the news that aren't necessarily about D&D and creating D&D, is that, quote, selling out? Or is that giving people what they want? Because they can say, whoa, why don't you do more videos on how you build things? Why aren't you doing more videos about the adventures you run? Well, he does that too. And they get a third to a quarter of the views. So you say you want it, but that's not what you want. And we literally have proof to see it. And if you look at any of his videos and you see his most popular videos, most of them, if not all of them, are videos talking about news and controversy in the world of D&D. So
it's probably the case that the people that leave those comments want it, but the larger audience
right that's how comments work. The people who don't like what they're currently seeing leave a comment because they don't, whereas the people who like it are much less likely to do so. I would have said that's almost guaranteed, except that, Esper, you gave us an example in your little polls of people where you knew from an absolute value that they didn't say the same thing that they actually did with your Kickstarter, where they said, oh yeah, I definitely am going to sign up, and then they didn't on absolute value. But in general, with those comments, you're 100% on point. I'm sure that one guy who was like, I don't like these news videos, probably didn't like Professor Dungeon Master's news videos, although I suppose they at least clicked on it long enough to leave the comment that they didn't like it.
Well, they probably didn't like it, but unfortunately, for every one person who didn't like it, there was 20 people who did.
Right. And they weren't the ones who were leaving the comments. So that's what it was. It's not necessarily that the people who said they didn't like it were lying and they actually secretly liked it in their deep in their hearts. It was just that they truthfully didn't like it and spoke up. But like you said, Stephen, 20 people who liked it, watched it casually, did not leave a comment, and moved on to whatever was next in their feed.
So I would say, if you want to stay relevant, pay attention to your channel, see what's doing well. And actually someone just wrote Bob's latest videos about the D&D creators not doing the honey scam. And there was a big scam going around that basically some of the biggest YouTubers, like the biggest YouTubers, were taking advertisements from this add-on called Honey, which was illegally taking everyone's money, and they're getting sued like left and right. And his video really, it's like, what does that have to do with D&D? I guarantee that video is going to do great, because he actually hit a great cross-section of D&D people, general YouTubers, people are interested in honey, which was a big topic right now.
And Legal Eagle made a video about it.
Legal Eagle suing them. And on top of that, Bob has a fantastic instincts. And unfortunately, that's something you just can't learn. He has good instincts. He always does videos that seem to be, not always, but I'd say 80% of the time, he seems to have a good pulse of what's going on and does videos that are interesting to not just D&D people, but outside people. Like when I discovered Bob because he did that video of how big 5 feet is, and that thing went viral. And that's how I was like, when I met him, I'm like, I know you from that video of how big 5 feet is. And then he tried to test it out, and 5 feet's really far. It's like, you can't actually hit someone from 5 feet away. It's like, really, the score should be closer. And he went viral with that video, and he's done it several times
from my
since.
recent Monster Melee video, Tavern Brawl, that a hawk has a 5-foot reach with its beak.
There you go. There you go. 5 foot. Well, it's like a telescopic beak. They're like, oh,
there you go.
That's
Yeah,
what-
it's like Mr. Fantastic. It
That's
stretches
what
out
I
its
think.
neck, like rubber, and
yeah. Whenever we play, because so I've been playing with the same guys for like 30 years, so they know, and I GM. So they'll be like, "What? How is that working?" They're like, "Just go with it," and we're always like, we laugh because we're like, it's a game, it's like it's not realistic. It's not supposed to be. And if you wanted to get realistic, well, this is not what we're playing. We're not playing it. We're playing a game, and in the
that's
end of
very
the day,
weird. In Pathfinder First Edition, which is the only Pathfinder that has a hawk, they do not have a 5-foot reach with their beak.
there you go.
There's still a lot of silly things that have a 5-foot reach, but not hawks, at least.
Yeah.
So, by the way, someone did have a question for me. This says, is Hasbro going to use advertising dollars to pump up the D&D ecosystem given their financial mess? They already have. If you saw yesterday, a whole bunch of videos came out talking about the new Monster Manual, and they actually did a great job because, hey, what do you know? The videos came out, each of them talked about a specific monster. They actually gave out the PDF page of that monster. No controversy so far. I was like, you see, that's the weird part. When they do their job right, you don't notice it.
Yeah, it seemed like that it was a great preview.
Very good.
The Monster Manual looks
It
good.
looks good. It looks good.
And there was less coverage about it because there wasn't controversy, but I think that's fine because that means that more people's eyes were focused on the previews that Wizards intended people to see. So,
yeah. But that's the thing. It's like when things go well, and this is another thing. I used to work when I worked at a newspaper. We used to say that it's like, because I didn't work in the news division, I worked in entertainment, but at the news division, they would be like, the only time we hear from people is when things go wrong. We never hear from people when things go right. It's like we put out the newspaper every day and not have any problems, but the day we put out something and there's a mistake, oh boy, do we hear it. And that's the problem. When you do your job right, you don't get anything. You get no rewards, no accolades.
Saying earlier in the episode.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem. And look at D&D. Like, they did a great job with the Monster Manual. We're talking about it, but is there any news about it? Do you see any news? Oh, news that WoTC put out previews from the Monster Manual and nothing went wrong today on Roll for Combat. No, that's not the news. The news was, hey, they actually started to blur some of the pages because people were given content to put on their YouTube channel and then told to remove it. So there was blur gates. That was getting news. Not that they were putting out information on the player's handbook. Ugh, it's so ridiculous.
Well, it's because it was controversial, but also just like very stressful for the people involved who were just trying to do what they were asked to do. So
yeah,
it came up because it was also just kind of like an interesting story. There were people in it who were really being affected, who could be like, the protagonists of the story. And that makes it something that people are interested to watch sometimes, as opposed to just like everything is fine.
Yeah. And by the way, Sly Flourish just talked about that in his latest stream. And he said, because he actually blurred his stuff. He put out the book, then he blurred it. And it took him all day and he was furious of it. But then he's like, well, in the end, though, I got the most views on that video than all my other videos. So it was worth it. No bad press. All press is good press. And that's the problem, is that doing the D&D Monster Manual previews is not bad press or good press. It's just basic press, and it's gonna get the hits that it gets, and the people who are gonna watch are the ones that are interested, which in a weird way is good because you want to have a very dedicated target audience. You're not going to get the hundreds of thousands of views that you would get with a scandal, but the people who are watching are the people who are very interested in it and actually want it. However, they're probably going to buy it either way. So I'm like talking myself into a marketing dilemma here. It's like, do you really want, you kind of want the scandal because then it gets generation of people knowing that the Monster Manual is coming out that they might not be aware of. And I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. It's a total
I think
mess.
they don't want the scandal. I think they'd prefer
Oh, I don't think
to
they
just
want it
have people
anymore.
focus on their marketing, their basic marketing, the message they want to send. I can tell you that at the very least, when I was at Paizo, we did not want a scandal.
No
We
one
wanted
wants.
to just
No one
people
wants
to-
a scandal.
We wanted people to look at our content for things. Now, Stephen, you might be right that hypothetically a giant scandal might have caused more people, especially when you're not D&D and you're a smaller company, might have
definitely.
caused more people to even understand that your company existed.
No, definitely.
But still, it's very stressful. Nobody is out there looking for a scandal.
So, was that helpful at all, Esper? I don't know if it is or not.
Yes. In general,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, basically, I would say just keep doing what you're doing. But if you're seeing things that resonate with people, do that. And if you're doing, and more importantly, if you're seeing things that don't resonate with people, but you enjoy doing, I've seen that so many times where people will say, I want to do this because I want to do it, and people will eventually discover it and it will take off. And then it never does. Now, sometimes they're right. Sometimes it will take off, but most of it won't. And, you can either chase after trends, but the advantage of a YouTube channel is that you get a lot of very good feedback, so you can actually see what's working and what's not. And so you're like, oh, if I
That's
did
very
it,
interesting.
yeah. I mean, you don't have to dedicate your whole channel to it. You can just test it out. Like, I don't know, I'm just making some crap up. Like, I did a video on monsters dating. There you go. Monsters dating. And it did really well. It's like, I'll try another one. And maybe it doesn't do well the second time. Maybe it was a one-off. But maybe, it was doing well. And you're like, all right, well, that's not really what I wanted to concentrate on. I just got up one day and had this idea and I wanted to do it. But now, am I stuck doing this for the rest of my life? And you see that a lot. Oh, if you ever watched, what was that? There was a show based in New Orleans. Oh, what was it called? Oh, I forgot the name of it. It was on HBO, and it was right during Katrina. And it was one of the stories was about this woman who was a chef, and she got really famous. She did like one dish, and everyone loved it. And before you know it, that's all anyone wanted, and it was driving her insane because she's like, oh my god, I hate this dish. It's like what put me on the map, and this is all anyone wants, and she hated it. It became her nemesis.
Okay, it was like her free bird.
Tremmy, Trem, yeah, that was the show. And yeah, it's like Freebird or like it was like, how many times do you go to a concert and then they're like, oh, we're going to play our new stuff, and everyone moans and no one's listening, and it's like, it's dead quiet because no one cares. They want to hear the hits. And they're like, oh, all right, I'll do Freebird for the 10 millionth time. So exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, just, kind of be true to yourself. Like, do what you want to do. And as long as you do something that you like, and if it becomes a hit, then it won't be too bad, But if you do something
there's a new series coming up soon, and
Okay,
I can't
good.
really say what it is yet, but I'm very motivated with it.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. I told Professor DM the idea, and I told Baron Drop the idea, and they both wanted in.
Okay, cool.
They both felt the
What is
spark
it?
too,
You got room
so.
for one more?
He can't say.
Oh,
He can't
okay.
say.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
secret.
Secret.
He can
All
talk
right.
to us after the show,
Oh,
Stephen.
okay. Now I want in.
I will want to do some promoting and hyping up before it actually launches.
Okay.
So the next step is going to be actually recording the thing.
Got it.
So then it will actually become a real thing instead of just files on my computer and ideas in my head.
Oh, so the other thing that's happening is that attention spans and what people are interested in for content is fascinating. Because right now, it used to be, so the sweet spot a couple years ago, this was like 10 years ago, was 7 minutes. 7 minutes was about, 7 to 15 minutes was about the most and least you'd want to do a YouTube video for. Well, now it's like 30 seconds. It's like, unfortunately, these really quick, within
My
5
most watched
minutes.
videos are long ones.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
but
30 to 60 minutes.
yeah, I mean, we do long form. I mean, we do 2-hour shows, so you're talking to the wrong person here. But the point is that a lot of people are growing up with TikTok, and that is forming their methods of consuming content. And TikTok is, I mean, if I watch my kids, my kids are 20 and 18. They go through their stuff. They're like, do, 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 do. And I'm like, are you watching any of this? Like, yeah, I got the gist in half a second. I'm like, half a second. And they're like, that's all they need. It is unbelievable. You know, it's like they don't need.
It's basically a drug.
Yeah. Yeah. It's insane.
It's a machine drug amalgamation.
Yeah. And by the way, if they stay on something for like 3 seconds, then they got your attention, you know? And that's the other thing is that YouTube has been pushing YouTube Shorts heavily. Like they really want YouTube creators to do shorts. The problem with shorts is that the money is garbage. So if you're a full-time creator, you can get a short that does 1 million hits and you can get like $1. If you do,
I like shorts only if they are used to help attract people to my main videos.
Right.
I think they're good in that way. And from a YouTube viewer, that's how I like shorts as well. I'll come upon a clip and I say, oh, that they said something interesting in there. I want to go actually watch the full video.
Yeah. But also the good news, I'm going to tell you the good news. Here's the good news. People's tastes change as they get older, and their needs change. And people will eventually, as the YouTubers the TikTokers get older, and they have to get into the workforce, even if they're working from home or they're in the cars more, they will start going back to long-form content. Not necessarily in the same numbers, but behavior changes, and right now the behavior for the youngest demographic is short form content.
Sure.
But eventually it will.
Yeah, you definitely change as you get older. Your
Right.
tastes change a lot. The
Exactly.
older you get, the more you realize how incredibly limited and precious your time is,
Mhm.
and that you need something that has depth and meaning to it to sustain you as you go forward in life.
Mhm.
You can't just grapple with the hooks and throws and pitfalls of life trying to sustain yourself on cheap entertainment.
Yeah. And also, you've seen it. That's the other thing. It also comes down to experience. Like, if you watch channel, you know, I'm a huge video gamer. I really only gravitate towards games that do something new because I've been playing games my whole life. I've seen the same thing 1,000 times. I don't need to play that same game over and over again with a different skin.
Yeah, for me, a game has to have artistry. It has to have aesthetic artistry to it. And if it doesn't have that, it's such a hard sell. It's just such a hard sell. If it just looks like every other game that's out there where it's trying to be so hyper realistic, it turns me off really bad.
Mm-hmm. So someone wrote, actually, Thanos wrote,
I see real life all the time. That's
well, that's actually why
I'm seeing real life. Why do I want to see someone poorly imitate real life with these 3D video game graphics?
So I actually, that's why I only read like fantasy novels, because like I've talked to people that like wife and from her friends are like, oh, because they only read like, you know, realistic, you know, nonfiction or like life type books. And I'm like, dude, I get enough of that. I'm like, I have enough life. I don't need to read about it. I'd rather read about dragons.
I actually read more nonfiction than fiction.
Oh, really?
But
Interesting.
The video game, that's something different.
Right,
that's
right.
not
But for
nonfiction.
me, I like
that's them
escapism.
Trying to be like real life. They're trying to make it look realistic.
So by the way,
it fails because it's not real. It looks so awkward and fake.
So by the way, interesting. By the way, is it better, easier to digest Saturday Night Live or Dropout? Saturday Night Live is my favorite show of all time, so I'm not a good person to talk about for that. So for me, it's always Saturday Night Live. Funny, my kids just got into it, and over the Christmas break, they were binging Saturday Night Live 24/7, which I loved. And my brother did by the way, the Saturday Night Live movie, if you didn't see it, my brother did the costumes for that one. And he and I were thrilled I was thrilled for him that he got to do that, because my brother also loves Saturday Night Live. And Dungeon Doctor wrote, see also the live action Disney remakes. That is actually to keep copyright alive. That is why they do those remakes, so that they continuously have new copyrights and trademarks in the system, because in the next couple of years, it's going to really get interesting, because Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and Mickey Mouse are all coming out of copyright. And oh boy, are things going to get interesting when that happens.
Oh my.
Yeah. No, only Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is not public domain. Only Steamboat Willie is public domain, which is a specific type of Mickey Mouse. Popeye just became public domain this year. But all the DC and Marvel superheroes in the next 10 years are all coming out of copyright. And hey, what do you know? Disney owns all of that. So that's one of the reasons they do that, is because you're able to like start to clock over in a way, because they're like, well, you have copyright to that very specific version. Like the version of Superman did not fly in the original.
He leapt tall buildings.
Correct. He
with
did
a
not
single
fly.
bound.
So you can't show him flying. But if you show him any other way, that's allowed. So you have to be very specific on how you show it. So that's a whole other topic we can get into. So I would just say, you just unfortunately just don't keep doing what you're doing because you like doing it. If you want your channel to stay alive, you have to do things if you're looking to grow your channel. And like Professor, and I think Bob, from the many times I've talked to him, they're hyper aware of how their videos are doing. Like they look very closely and very active of how their videos are doing, and they fine tune their approach and what they're saying and doing based on that. And I don't know if the other ones were or weren't, I can't speak to that, but for them it's working. And I think if you just keep trying to do the same old, and you're getting decreasing returns, and you're like, well, why am I not getting 50,000 views like I used
I'm always
to?
experimenting with new things.
Okay, good.
I never stick to same old. I experiment until something resonates with people.
There you go.
And then I will produce more of that thing. The thing that's thrown me for a loop is in this past year, 2024, I have had a couple different new types of videos, and they did do great. And then they just mysteriously lose their steam again, much faster than I've ever seen in the past. Monster Melee is a great example. I launched the Monster Melee series just this past year, and it came out of the gates swinging, and it was hot. And I was like, oh, great. I thought this was cool. Apparently a lot of other people do. So let me make a lot more Monster Melee videos and get better at that format. And I got better at it pretty quickly. I'd say within a month or two, I figured out a lot of ways to make the format better. And then it's just like, and just all the steam comes out of it. And I do look at the analytics quite closely, and I'll have videos that have wonderful click-throughs, even as much as 10 or 11%. And I'm like, great. And it literally says there in the Creator Studio, this is increasing its reach and helping to get recommended more by YouTube. And it's like, awesome. And there are fireworks going off. And then just like a couple of days later, they stop getting promoted. They stop getting recommended. And it's like a balloon. There's like someone suddenly just like let go, and the air runs out. And then the whole series has lost its momentum.
Yep.
Has lost the majority of its, not all of it, but the majority of its momentum within, I want to say August till now, 5 months, 4 months, like 4 months.
Yeah, well, I would also say like that.
What the hell?
Well,
Why?
that will happen because, people might have clicked on it, and like anything, like a TV show, because this happens to me. Like, I don't watch your Monster Melee.
Are you saying maybe they were curious about the concept, they liked the idea, or like
few times
new like a novelty factor,
yes.
But then the actual goods didn't deliver enough to hold the attention.
In that case, I would look at how long people watch on average, because I bet My instinct is that it's, and we might be talking seconds here, but YouTube looks at that. Like maybe your initial videos, I'm literally making stuff up. Maybe you had a 10-minute video and people were watching it for 2 minutes on average, or say 3 minutes. We'll say 3 minutes, which is really good. And if you're like, wow, and then like the percentage of people who stayed. But then if you watch the ones after that, it's very slowly going down. Not a lot. We could talk about like 1%, but to YouTube, 1% is a lot, and it can actually see, okay, there's less engagement, but there's something else that's hitting a little bit higher engagement, so it's recommending those instead. So to you, it looks like it's falling off a cliff, when in reality, it could have literally just gone down 1 or 2%, which in turn is like it hit a plateau where it did fall off a cliff, if that makes sense. So
I think so. I think I get what you're saying.
it basically is that it's hard to keep the same thing going. And that's also why if you ever do live streams, the first ones, it always goes down. It's always going to go down. It's like, that's why you always have to constantly, I used to do series, but we don't do series anymore. Well, like everything we do is kind of a one-off, because this way there's always a reason to come back. And if you think about the most
if you do a series, then people will be like, no, I want to start from the beginning. And then they'll be like, oh gosh, there's this many in it. I don't think I can get through that.
Yeah. Or they get their fill.
Series is I'm going to record and produce them all in advance. Then I can upload them real fast to one another, and then do a super cut of all of them together within a short span of time.
I can see that. But yeah, I mean, I've heard all these metrics that are supposedly good. And look, I've had a video that like somewhat recently on like a few days ago, it had a 26% click-through rate, with over 50% of it being watched on average on my channel. And that did not cause YouTube to show it to very many other people. So like, it is what it is. It was obviously, my channel is very small anyway. And this was not for like 2 people that caused that thing. It was several hundred, which is not a lot, but that's a lot for my channel. So there's definitely not like a law that said, even though a lot of people have sometimes told me who are on bigger channels, sometimes when I did collabs, they're like, I don't know what's happening here, because this has thousands of views with a 18% click-through rate, so it should be being shown to a lot of people, but it's not.
Yeah,
so there's obviously some complicated stuff going on.
So some people asked me if I saw Secret Level episode 1. That's the D&D episode. I've not watched it yet, but if anyone wants to see, so John Statz is one of my best friends. He was the lead designer on World of Warcraft. He was the first 3D designer ever hired by Blizzard. If you watch Game Changers, episode 6, John Statz, who's obviously my weekly game every week, if you also watch us do our Pathfinder content, he is featured in Game Changers on HBO, and they interview him about World of Warcraft quite a bit. So if you ever wanted to see what he looks like, there you go. It just made me think of it, because he told me he was going to be on it, and then I literally turned on Game Changers, and the thumbnail is his face. So I was like, wow, either they're really good at knowing who I know, because thumbnails, there's like, this is famous, there's something like 500 thumbnails for every piece of content, and they're so good now, HBO and Netflix, they actually figure out the thumbnail for you that make you watch it. Like if you and I looked at each other's Netflix, our thumbnails would be completely different for the exact same content. So I was like, okay, if they know that I'm friends with John Statz and they literally changed the thumbnail to make it him, good call. I'm very impressed. HBO or Max.
So there is a super chat from Derek of Knights of Less Call that says, obviously the YouTube channels are dying because they make content no one wants to watch and it's way too long. Oh wait, that's my channel. Cheers, boys.
It's so true. So Derek, this is the funny thing about Derek. So Knights of Last Call, he does videos every Tuesday, every Thursday, and Sunday that are like 3 hours long, 4 hours long. And he talks about the most esoteric niche games in the entire world. Like, even I've never heard of half of the things he's talking about. But his channel keeps growing, man. So he jokes about it, but his channel is slowly but steadily growing and getting bigger all the time. So obviously someone likes it. But I don't think he'll ever get to the 100,000 mark. I mean, he just won't. He's going to hit a plateau eventually. But that's okay because he's hitting the audience that he wants. So, and that's something else, knowing that, you know, like, I'm not going to name names, but I've seen people who will have channels with 100, 200,000 people, and they do a Kickstarter and no one shows up. And they're like, I don't get it. I have 200,000 subscribers. No one backing my Kickstarter. Of course, I've seen the other way around where people have these big channels and like everyone shows up for their Kickstarter. So, you know, again, it's knowing your audience. You know, is your audience there just to watch you do goofy stuff but don't really care about D&D or playing or gaming? Or are they there to actually game and learn about gaming and are interested in your product and what you're doing? So, anyhow. I've been talking too much. Why don't you ask
freaky,
questions to Mark, and or if you have more D&D, gaming questions, because you have access to the man you've probably read in more books than almost anyone alive at this point. I think in the TTRPG sphere. We put out. I have a list, by the way, Mark, and I'm including fusions and all of those. I think we have 30.
Yeah, you should include the free products.
I
and
do.
Include the 5e as separate than
I
PF2.
do. I think we had 38 products. So every 9.5 days we come out with a new book. By the way, so on average, week and a half we come out with a new book here. And most of them have your name on them, so that's helping to add to your numbers right there.
That's true, but that's partially because sometimes like we'll hit like April and we'll wind up doing like 6,
Yes.
and then there'll be a gap where there's not any.
Yes, but anyhow,
When you say you do a new book, what do you mean specifically?
we publish a new book.
It ranges between somewhere around 20 pages with the cover and the back matter and stuff like that at the short end to like a 500-page monstrosity Jewel of the Indigo Isles.
They're books. We have to I put them out. We have to make modules from them.
No, they are books either way.
Books.
Look, a 20-page book is a book.
Yeah.
I'm saying that it is a book, but it ranges between that and 20 to 500 pages.
Yeah, every quarter.
Every 9 days?
Yes.
On average, because of the fact that sometimes we do 4 on the same day, and then that way we have more than a month before the next one. For example,
we put out
on
4
April
books.
1st,
well, January 1st, we put out 4 books.
We will get 4 books because we will have a free April Fool's product that is like a serious, legitimate book, but that is about a very silly topic. So you first think it was a fake, and then you're like, wait, they actually made a thing where we can play a dungeon as our character. And so we'll get 2 for that because one of them is 5e and one of them is PF2. And then we'll have our 2 regularly scheduled. In this case, for this year, it's going to be Living Spells is going to be our regularly scheduled April Ancestry. So that's 4 at least. And then that's not counting anything else that we might have completed during that time. So it's certainly possible that we can wind up with like 5 or 6 in April, for example. And then that way we can have 1 month where we didn't do any.
Okay, I have immediately a lot of questions. And
Okay.
forgive me,
Yes, we're
everybody.
insane.
I really came onto this show not knowing what I was getting
It's
into.
fine, it's
So
fine.
you have to treat me as a complete, naive, ignorant fool. Where do you sell your books?
Everywhere.
So everywhere. So
Everywhere?
we've got
Barnes and Noble.
Battlezoo.com,
Yeah.
which is the preferred place because that is Steven runs that, and so Steven can get like most of the resulting stuff from that. But
Okay, you have your own online shop.
yes, we have an
Yes.
online shop.
But there's also an
in-
Amazon
and in
shop,
brick and mortar bookstores.
Yes.
brick
yeah.
and mortar bookstores. Look, go to barnesandnoble.com and look up Battlezoo,
Yeah,
and you will find some of the books that are on it.
Yeah, our
When
distributors.
you held up Battlezoo, that looked, hardcover,
Yeah.
supplement book, fully produced. But every 9 days, like how is that? Do you have a team?
Not all of them are that long.
No, we do we do one of these every 3 to 4 months, but we do 2 because there's always a Pathfinder. and a
Every
D&D.
month we do 2 books that are about 20 pages long, and so that will obviously help the average because that's 24 of the 38. That's like 2/3 of them are going to be short. Actually, it's really 26 because of the April Fool's product. And so probably only the other 12 are books that are 100 pages long or longer.
Wait, Mark,
But
someone just said
what
they
about,
would...
What about editing, layout, and art? I
Me.
know those are 3 different pieces.
Me, I do all that.
Yeah, so I do the writing
all of that?
or the developmental editing, depending on if we have freelance. Then Steven does the layout. He doesn't draw the art, of course,
don't draw
but he
the
has
art.
to interface with
But
the
I art
artists.
direct. I art direct.
Yeah,
all
he's
of
the
them.
art director and layouts. And
You have a team of artists that are
I have about, we have like 20, 30 artists at all times.
just freelancers that you work
We
with
pay them,
regularly.
yeah, they're full time. Yeah, we have a couple of full time freelance that I basically just give them constant work. So we
Okay,
have.
'cause I did the art directing in my books, and I also did some of the illustrations, but there's only so much I can do.
I don't do any
so
illustration. Nope.
Okay.
But I do all the
also
layout.
we have Kickstarter projects for new things as well.
That was
So
going to be my next question: is you kickstart some of them, like the main
All of them.
main ones?
pretty much everything.
No, we kickstart everything. We do 4 to
Everything.
5 Kickstarters a year.
So you okay? So do you just do back to back?
Yep.
Like sequential
Yep.
Kickstarters?
Yep. Back to back to back. We never stop. In fact, we launched one right
And-
now while we're talking. No, I'm kidding.
Wait, no, we didn't. Please, Steven, don't give me a heart attack.
Although I'm working on right now in the other window, I'm doing it right
A heart
now.
attack if you launched it
Well,
without even
this is really
checking the
because
detail.
one thought that I've had is I need to put out more books, put out more content, like release more books, do more Kickstarters. My Kickstarter that just ended, the one that I just talked about, was just a module, only a module, not a big old supplement thing that has tons of different dimensions and elements to it. And then my next Kickstarter is planning to be an adventure module as well. So this is very interesting. You crank out so many. So you just work on this day and night every day.
Pretty much.
So
I actually have another
pretty
full-time
much.
job. I run
Steven has another job,
I run
but
a company.
But he also is
On the
always
marketing
spending
side
huge
things?
amounts of time on the books, and this is I have a small business that is entirely contracts out RPG stuff, and the vast majority of it is with Steven, although which is enough for like a full-time job. I'm technically not an employee. I'm a contractor. I also work with other companies too. But yes, so we just do, like, the fact that we do this many books does not mean that you should be doing that many books. We do an amount that is mind-bogglingly high. And when I was talking to someone recently online who was like, I was under the impression that you had like 20 people working on layout and editing and these books that were like, there was this giant company. Well, I mean, not giant, but there was like a whole company of people, and it was like, it's 2 of us plus there's some freelancers for like the art and some of the other things too, right? And there's people who do the virtual tabletop conversions and things like that. But and then the person was like, you must be like the Brandon Sanderson of writing that much RPG content. And I was like, well, Brandon says how much he does in a day. And if all I'm doing in that day is writing, then I usually do write that much, sometimes more than the amount that he writes in a day. But because I'm also like, he has a big dragon still, he can just write. Steven and I are often making other decisions and doing other aspects of figuring things out. There are not as many days where I can be only writing, so I don't, like, my average is lower than the number of words per day of Brandon, but most people's are not that high, so you do not need to put out that many books.
And also, I try to leave Mark alone whenever possible, because I know when he's cranking. So, also,
But it's not. Let's just say it's not always possible.
Yeah, but Mark and I are insane. Like, not no one, but it's going to be hard to replicate what we do, because our experience and also fits perfectly with each other, because he does the design and he does the writing and he does the game balance. And my background is I've been doing layout and design since '88. So how many years is that? 30.
Okay.
So I have extensive experience and I taught it. So, I can,
Nice.
I
I
can
also do the layout of my books.
right. So I do all the layout. I like to do the layout of my books. And then the art direction, I've been doing that for years. So it's like these are just things I already knew how to do in my other job.
Yeah, I also enjoy art directing quite a bit too.
Right. So it's not that hard.
Talking to the artists and meeting new artists and helping support them. And
my actual company that builds Fortune 500 websites is all virtual. And I sold my first company in 2004. I think it was 2004 I sold it. And so it's been 21 years that I've been virtual, and I've been working remotely way before everyone else. And we had it down pat. And that's the other thing. So it's been, now everyone discovered it during COVID. During COVID, it was like another day in the office, like nothing changed for us, like we were still going just as strong because I didn't do anything different. If anything, we had more work that I could deal with. But there was a super chat. There was actually a lot of chats.
Yeah,
but
there were a bunch of chats and topics. The super chat wondered from David Olson, $4.99, said, guys, do you think the Wizards monster stat blocks are going to be balanced this time around? And we haven't seen a lot of them. What we've seen so far seem like they sometimes are a little closer. Like they do more damage on some of the ones that weren't doing nearly enough damage to actually be threatening to anybody. So it's certainly going to be closer. But the problem I feel is that when you're asking that question, first of all, the word balanced is something that nobody defines the same way. And I probably don't define it the same way that you do who's asking it or anybody else who's watching it. A. And B, to an extent, it can't really be the monster's fault completely when there's such a disparity between the player characters' power levels. What are you balancing it to? Right? Like if the expectation is that the player characters are going to be here, but they're actually like so high up, I have to like stand up and then put my hand through the ceiling. If you build one of the meta builds that is just very above the power level expectations, then is that the monster's fault that the monsters aren't balanced, or the monsters balanced for where they want to be, but that there was the control of the player character options was not in the place where it kept them in line with the monsters? And the answer to that could be either one. We don't know what the answer to that question is.
Yeah, I don't know.
From my experience, it's been, you have your monster building guidelines. They're not an exact science, and you use those plus maybe some amount of playtesting to get a rough estimate of the monster's challenge rating, and that's about as good as it can be.
At least in 5e.
As you just said there, Mark. Yeah, 4e was probably closer to a science, but
5e Pathfinder 1
the encounters
third edition,
interesting. They were more mechanical and predictable, and so if it's really balanced, it's not as dynamic. It's not as fun.
Yes and no. Pathfinder is actually second edition.
Pathfinder 2, to be clear. Pathfinder 1 was also just like you said, Esper. Like when I was running 3.5 or Pathfinder 1, I needed to use those guidelines, and then I needed to play test because it didn't even matter what difficulty it said the monster was. I literally had a monster one time for my high level group in 3.5 D&D that was level 40, and my group was like around 20 that they easily beat, and one that was a CR 21 that they had trouble with. And I knew because I had play tested using the character sheets that I had copies of for their characters and running them all myself. I knew that was going to happen. So I made the CR21 as a bigger deal than the CR41.
Sure.
And
CR21
just some of those
probably
systems
had some way to exploit an Achilles heel in the party.
Yeah, well, it wasn't even that, just as the opposite. That the CR40 had an Achilles heel that the party had a good way to exploit. And the CR21 was not vulnerable to that. So you're right about that. And so in some of those systems, and look, I'm not ragging on 5e. It's a lot of systems. It's Pathfinder 1. You just can't trust the monster builder very far. It can help. It'll get you somewhere. But I do think that the Pathfinder 2 monster builder that Logan and I came up with, a lot of people, at least online, are saying that they find that the monsters they build with that are pretty accurate. Obviously, you're right. It's art and science combined. It's never going to be like
There's come up with some parts in there.
You can come up with some synergy that's way stronger than it seems based on the numbers or vice versa for the monsters or the player characters. But at the very least, what I hear from people on the streets who are playing the game, who usually are the first ones to tell you when it's not working, like we talked about earlier in the episode, is that it does work within a boundary of error in a way that like most of the monster builders do not.
So real quick, I'll get my very quick 2 cents. Is that
people are saying that in chat too?
Is that I think the issue with 5e is that the players were made very strong and the monsters were made a little weak, and I prefer to build monsters very strong, or at least pretty strong, because it's a lot easier as a DM to make monsters weak on the fly than to make them strong. It's very easy to weaken them. So I would
in general agree with everything you just said there.
Yeah, so
I'd say the 5e monsters are a little underpowered.
Exactly.
A lot of them feel like they're probably 1 CR under what the book says, maybe 2 in some cases.
they're just not strong enough. I think they did it on purpose because I think they wanted it to be, a much simpler. The game itself philosophy is very different. But that's also like if you're a DM and we were fighting, so in my game, I'm playing a game and they're up to level 19. They have one spellcaster who's basically a healer. They have a monk, they have an investigator, and they have a thief. So if there's monsters that they just suck at because they're just a very weirdly balanced party. And as a GM, I need to know that and adjust the monsters on the fly to make sure they don't get destroyed, because that's not fun for anyone. And that's something you just have to be aware of. And I've also seen them just utterly annihilate other types of monsters, because of that's the thing, is that there's never such thing as a balanced party. It just doesn't exist. There's always parties that are going to be weak and strong in such ways, and therefore you have to be, as a GM, know that you need to adjust monsters on the fly to make them either more challenging, less challenging, more fun, less fun for your party. And if you're going to run them vanilla as
when you say adjust them on the fly, are you talking about in the middle of a combat encounter?
God, yeah.
You change the statistics?
Yeah, always. Yeah, I do that all the time.
I never change the statistics.
I never.
And I don't fudge die rolls, but I have no problem with people who do. Yeah. I just don't. But I know that I can always use different amounts of tactics as is appropriate for the creature's intelligence and within the range of possibilities.
Well, let me give you an example.
Prioritize things differently. Like if they want to run away, I might think about how things are going and whether that would be more interesting.
Let me ask you this. So to all of our basically the party is based around precision damage. Okay.
Yeah, so if there's an immunity to precision,
they were fighting not just everything. It wasn't just one. It was a whole family of monsters. So everything in the damn chapter was immune to precision or had resistance. And it was, okay, I could either run it as is, and we're literally going to have 50 hours of fights because it's going to take goddamn forever because they have so many resistances, which is not fun for anyone, or I just remove it and just say, screw it. I don't care. It's not there.
So that's what I did. The challenge from a published adventure is, I would say, very different than just published. On the fly adjusting the statistics.
No, it's a published adventure.
Not that I have a problem with people on the fly adjusting statistics. I just don't.
Well,
but I might have changed it to different creatures that people would have more fun with. If I thought they were going to win, but that it was going to be a slog.
Well, here's the thing.
For example,
they didn't know. No, it didn't change the fun of the fight. If anything, they actually had a lot of fun with the fight. And the fact that the precision didn't change anything about the fight at all. That was the thing. It's maybe, in the monster lore, if you look deep into it, it made sense. But in the moment, they don't. If I asked them what they fought last week, none of my players could even remember the name of the monsters. They just wouldn't. It's not that big of a deal to them. But if I ask them, did you have fun? They'll be like, oh yeah, that was fun. So that's what I change, at least when I run my games. So I don't know. I also, I'm very reactive. And also when you play with the same guys for 30 years and you play once a week, I know what they like. And I know what they don't like. So I'm able to, I can do it. I can do it. If I met people off the street and I was playing in a pickup group, I would not do that. I would probably play it as written, or as Mark says, change their intelligence. I wouldn't change the actual stats. So, but that's me. Anyhow. We had a few more things real
there's
quick.
a lot of decisions that the GM can make that impact how the strength of a monster is applied or constrained.
So, by the way,
And
someone
sometimes you get
someone said they saw our books at a Tim Hortons in.
That's awesome.
I know. Take a picture, man. And then Avenue Studios asked us why their game store doesn't have our books, because you have to ask them. I mean, seriously, all you do is ask them to order it. They'll order it. Or actually, so we are with Alliance and Diamond. If their game store doesn't get their books from Alliance or Diamond, then you can't get our books because we're not with. There's like 4 major distributors, and I'm trying to get with the others, but they're not accepting me for some reason, which is weird because I'm like, I'm in Ingram, which is Ingram and Barnes and Noble, like the 2 largest book distributors, and I'm in both of them, but I can't get into these smaller distributors. So whatever, I'm doing my best. I'd rather be in the big distributors than struggle, and then not be in the big distributors and be in the smaller distributors. So whatever. So that's the reason if you don't see our products is they might not get their books from Alliance or Ingram. So that's why. Anyhow.
most of your books, you do a 5e version and a PF2 version?
Every book.
Pretty much everything.
Every book.
Nice.
And we're starting Shadow Dark.
Does it require a lot of work converting between the two?
We have a team.
Uh-huh.
We have
Okay.
It can be significant, especially if you start from 5e and go to PF2. That is harder.
You cannot do that.
But if you go from PF2 to 5e, or it can be done.
Yeah,
But
I would not recommend
if you
it.
start with 5e and go to PF2, you kind of need to hire someone who really knows PF2 and might be rebuilding everything from scratch, or at
Strongly
least a highly significant
recommend
amount.
that.
I know this because I have been the person who's been hired,
Yes.
and my wife has been the person who has been hired,
Yes.
and that is what needs to be done. But if you buy it from if you start from PF2, you can usually build the 5e or especially the Shadow Dark version just using only pieces of what you already saw in PF2. And the reason being that especially Shadow Dark doesn't have as many things in it. So you need to invent new things or like kind of rebalance stuff if you started on 5e or Shadow Dark and then moved to PF2. Whereas with PF2, it's like looking, oh, this is like a wealth of stuff and I can pull some or maybe even all of it for the 5e version and just kind of make a 5e version of that works and fits in the 5e meta. So we find that it's easier to convert Pathfinder 2 content to 5e than the other way around.
Is it because Pathfinder is more complex than D&D?
Or it's because it allows for more, it generally has more expression in it. Now that doesn't mean that it's impossible to make 5e monsters to use monsters for an example, that would be great and easy to convert to Pathfinder 2. You can. But it's also possible to make a 5e monster that you could look at and be like, this could be in a monster manual. This is as good as what Wizards of the Coast put out in a monster manual monster. And you even look and say, it's just like this one in the monster manual. And be asked to convert it into Pathfinder 2 and be like, this does not have nearly enough that it does to be a Pathfinder 2 monster. At that point. So that's the thing. Like I've seen 5e monsters or material that I look at it as like, oh yeah, this is great. I can convert this to Pathfinder 2 easily. But it is possible to make a professionally published, good, perfectly good and reasonable 5e thing that is nowhere near being able to convert it into Pathfinder 2. And it's difficult to do it the other way around. I've found like pretty much everything that has been made for Pathfinder 2, you can make something that's like it for 5e. And I mean something that is faithful to the original, to the point that on our Discord, there was a time I remember I found a little heartwarming because a lot of our Pathfinder 2 community members are like also just like very helpful and want to help people out. Whereas some of our 5e community members are more likely to be the people who are like pretty new and are asking questions. So we had an Eldamon system, which is like collect and battle and train these 162 Eldamon. It's got new base classes. It's a brand new magic system based on that. It is not using spells or spell slots. It's got like hundreds of things in it. And that was all converted. And one person who asked a question had a conversation for about 20 minutes with another person on our Discord. And after I was just watching it, it was going great. They were being helpful. They were answering questions. After about 20 minutes, the person's like, wait a minute, this is confusing to me. Why did you say this? That's not what it says in the book. And the first person was like, no, it does. And I came in at that point. I was like, so guys, it turns out that I've now determined based on that person one who asked the question, you're using the 5e version. Person two, you're using the Pathfinder version. And up until now, you all thought it was the same thing because, well, the kind of things you were talking about were true in both. But that is a specific detail that's different in between the two versions because of the way the game system works. And they were like, you're right. And the Pathfinder 2 person who kind of knew about both is like, you're right. Now that I think about it, I should have realized they were using the 5e version. And so it is possible to do, but I would suggest not doing it the other way around, or budget more money and resources to convert from 5e to PF2 for those ones that are like a rockier conversion than you would for the other way around.
This is a totally different question, but I'm like vibing off of the language you're using here. Have you ever had a moment, maybe it was during the design of PF2, or maybe it's now as you're designing these other products, when you get this idea for a mechanic that it strikes you with kind of like a brilliance? It doesn't necessarily even fit, though. It doesn't fit the system. It's something really different, but it kind of like keeps you up at night. You're like, how can I work that in? Maybe this needs to be a different game. Like, did you ever have that kind of a muse's call?
I think that happens a lot. It happens for every game designer. Like, every game designer has pieces and bits of the game. Like, when people ask, it's like, do you have ideas for a new edition of the same game or other things that didn't make it into the game? The answer is always yes. We have ideas to change things, because that's the game designer's way. Always tinkering, always coming up with ideas that might not have fit. Maybe they would have fit, but that they didn't fit the meta or what the audience was looking for. So definitely, absolutely.
So I was listening to a bit of Joe Rogan podcast in my car today, and he said something that resonated with me. He was talking about when he was getting into martial arts when he was young, like I think like in high school, basically. And he was like, so one way people can, develop an art form or a skill is that they have a lot of discipline, and, you have to do this training or learn these skills, and you may not like the training. It may be uncomfortable. You have to kind of endure it, but discipline is like what makes you do this thing that you hate, so that you can become good at something you love. And he said, but that wasn't my case. For me, I became obsessively interested in his case, it was martial arts. And when he started talking about being obsessively interested in something to where it doesn't really require discipline, because you're like, it's like propelling you forward. It's like wind in the sail of your boat. And he's like, I was obsessed, and that's all I did day in, day out, every single day was, practice this and learn about this. And it resonated with me so much. And then I thought about, what if that happened to me? Or, I mean, it could happen to you or anybody, I guess, who's designing games. What if that happened to me, but it was like a groundbreaking new type of game? Groundbreaking. Like, I read this little article once written by Richard Garfield, creator of Magic the Gathering. And he said, I'd been working on this game, Magic the Gathering, and I thought it was really cool. And, I just basically had index cards or simple cards or something that I'd written the basic of these cards on. And I was in college, and I invited my friends over one night to play test it. I said, hey, I've been working on this idea for a game. Come on over and play. And my buddies came over, and we sat there playing this game, and we really were liking it, and we got into it. And then we realized the sun was coming up, and it was the next day already. And we'd been playing this game all night long, just in our own world, and time just melted away. That's it right there. That's that crazy, like, magic, right? Literally the wondrous quality and something calls to you, have you ever had like a little glimmer or a hope or a wish? Like, I want to do that. I want to innovate on that level, like open a whole new territory, a whole new frontier in gaming, and like capture people, win their hearts.
Basically, the products we put out. To be honest, I mean, Mark came to me and he said, when I first worked with him, he really wanted to put out a dragon book, and so I said, okay.
Yeah, because Steven said, what else could we do? Because he was doing a big, giant adventure, and he was doing a bestiary.
Yep.
I said, I want to do a dragon book. It's that book. Dragon, playable dragons. I said, it's interesting. I have ideas for it, and people want to do it. And we can do that next. And Steven's like, yeah, we can do that next. Then a little while later, he launched his Kickstarter, and sure enough, that dragon book, which I was talking about him as maybe we can do like the PDF for the chassis and like a few dragons first, and then, you know, launch smaller expansions with other dragons. Sure enough, the Kickstarter had a over 100-page hardcover book of the dragon book in it. That was already going to be in the same one as the first two books. And that's when I learned that Stephen Glicker is always going to do more products.
It's our best-selling product.
The dragon book. What's the name of that one?
Battlezoo Ancestry's Dragons.
It's our best-selling book. It's basically one of the only ones that was like really like completely my idea, where Stephen was just soliciting, because Stephen has so many good ideas for books.
I'm looking at Roll for Combat Kickstarters. I'm not seeing that one.
Oh, well, the first one had that was 3-4 years ago. Isles and Battlezoo Bestiary. It's the very first Kickstarter.
Yeah, just go to battlezoo.com and you can see it there. I mean, the Kickstarter's so old; it's long been finished.
Okay.
So
I gotcha.
I mean, basically, we kickstarted, and now we have it down to a science. I mean, the Kickstarter helps us determine. It helps us determine actually what's in the book and how much we can do with the book. Because, like, we're going to do the book either way, but then the Kickstarter determines how much bigger or how much we could do with it. I mean, like, we just came out with 4 more dragon books, really 8 more dragon books. And, you know, did extremely well. So I actually expanded them. And I mean, it's taking a little longer, but the books are better for it, you know, and they're just stronger books. But because it did so well.
How much do you usually develop before you launch your Kickstarter?
Well, now we used to not develop anything. Now we develop like half to 70 maybe percent. I mean, we at least have it being worked on. And we have enough that we start the Kickstarter. But we also come out with consistent products. Because, like, we came out with our 3rd bestiary. We're coming out with 5 dragon books. Okay. We come out with the Year of Monsters, then the Year of Legends, and the Year of Titans. So we're coming out with consistent products. We are coming out with brand new products as much as we used to. So it's a little easier because we have a structure already set. And quite frankly, also it's working. Because the other thing is, when we come out with ideas, I'm trying to come up with, like, the adventure was a one-off. And then we actually had a world book, which was probably one of my favorite books we worked on, which was also a one-off because we had so much leftover stuff from the adventure that we're like, well, we can make a world book out of this. So it all worked out.
How'd the world book do?
It's not for an entire world. To be clear, it's a setting book.
Setting in the world. Sorry.
It's a setting lore book that is for an archipelago that is part of our larger world. So if we ever wanted to do more of them, we could. But also, it's very easy to add an island chain to your world. Whatever your world is, as long as it's not like Dark Sun Athos with no oceans.
Sure.
Then
how did the book do compared to your other books?
Oh, those books never do as well as your other books, unless you're a giant setting Kickstarter that makes a ton of money because it just goes strong. But if you're selling a setting book and you're also selling other books, the setting books just generally do not do as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Dragon book is your best one yet?
Oh yeah, that one does really well.
Okay, so let's consider that one the 10 out of 10. How much out of 10 was the setting book?
Like a 6. I mean, it didn't do terrible, and still selling, because we also had 10 ancestries in there. We had new monsters. There's a lot in there, so it's not just one. It's not just setting. It's like there's
Sure.
a lot of content, so you can use it
But
in
even
multiple
then,
ways.
compared to a book that just had the ancestries, a setting book, just
Mhm.
it has trouble. It has trouble finding its way, and I think that part of it is because for a long time, setting books sort of ceded their place as books that were meant for the GM, and they would have secret information in there that was not something the GM even wanted the players to know. You would have issues, even if it had playable content, where like famously, notoriously, the Eberron campaign setting, an excellent overall setting, had a spoiler. Karnath is secretly a vampire and nobody knows. That was just like on the next page from like one of the classes or races that was in there, and you would just see it just right in front of your face right there, and it was like, man, that's like one of the secrets of the setting. And now I know
our setting book though was made for players and GMs though.
Right.
Yeah,
we tried to do that
because that part really should just be in a GM book.
But GM books don't sell.
But then it's like,
it's hard for people to know.
Book. Yeah.
It's hard for them to retrain and understand that the setting book is for them, even if you tell them that, because many setting books have just over time, and that Eberron campaign setting also had, lots of rules. It was the player book for Eberron too. But a lot of world lore books, especially if they're not like that one, just over the years have just sort of seeded their way to be like, this is going to be a GM book, and everyone thinks or expects that. So even if you try to make one, it's like, no, this has things you would want as a player, like things that if you live in this place, or ways that you would think, or like sort of customs or culture, things that like are important to your character, not just to like some long history document of everything that ever happened there. People just don't expect to get that, and so it's hard to reach past the expectations and have players be interested, even if you are ready to make one that is set more towards players.
Also, I'm glad we did it, because we have a huge adventure path, so it all ties together. Like we have this gigantic adventure path that ties into the setting book, that ties into our bestiary, that ties into our dragon book. So they all cross-reference each other.
Yeah, it's good to have that like base reference there.
Yeah, and we actually do re-reference it quite a bit. We have a great god system, and we re-reference our gods in our books all the time. Nice. So, but it's also done in a gently way. We're not like forcing it down your throat, so it's easy for you to adapt to your game.
So also, Sketches Sword Rex in chat asks, do the GM books sell better if they have example adventures in there? I have found they do not. Obviously, some of the D&D books do have example adventures and sold great, partially because they're D&D books. But based on my knowledge, at least from like other places where people try ones that have an adventure in there, ones that don't have an adventure in there, in general, it doesn't always help. One of the issues, if you have a book that seems to have like content anyone could use, here's a new player class, here's an adventure that's in there, here's some new monsters, then it causes, even if you price it to be like a real bargain where you don't even need to be using everything in there to get a huge value from it, people are just finding excuses not to buy the product. And for them, if they're a player, having that adventure in there could be an excuse not to buy it. If they're a GM, having the adventure, if they aren't planning on running that adventure because they run their own campaigns or they think it's too specific, could be a reason not to buy it, because they'd be like, well, I like everything else that's in this book. I like all the monsters. I like the thing for setting horror, but this one horror adventure that's in there, I'm never going to run, and that's 20 pages of it, so maybe not. So it can actually give people an excuse not to buy it, and it can wind up being not a good idea. That being said, obviously, sometimes books sell really well that have that in there too.
My recent Kickstarter, the adventure module, Eldritch Castle, part of the adventure is animated dungeon rooms. It's a very puzzle exploration mystery based kind of Metroidvania like adventure, along with monsters. There's combat in there, of course. And so the series I did on my YouTube channel was from a first person perspective. In every room, you see this like animated dungeon room in this strange wizard castle. And I thought that was a really cool way to give a kind of immersion and a visual aid. And then with the part of the Kickstarter is you get you can download the video files, or you can access a YouTube playlist, whatever, if you want to stream them or actually run the videos locally. But then I got some comments from people saying, "Oh, I wouldn't want to show videos. That's not role playing. If I wanted that, I'd just play a video game. I just want to do theater of the mind." And I'm like, then just don't use the videos. Like, that's not a requirement. But just like you said, some people will just look for an excuse just any excuse they could latch onto to downplay it or downgrade it or
to think of why they're not going to get it. I'll show you how that ties into game design too. Ribbon abilities. I've literally talked to a professional game designer who I was looking at some feats for a class, and they pointed me to one of the feats, and they're like, "Mark, I don't know about this feat. I think it might be weak." I was like, "Oh, okay. So why do you think it might be weak?" And they pointed me to one line, which, by the way, was a ribbon ability that was sort of just added on to the feat at the end for flavor text. They're like, "This thing really looks like it's almost never going to come up, doesn't it?" I was like, "I think you're right. Hold on a second." So I got like a book or something that could cover it up, and of the printout they were showing me, I just covered up the part with that line. I was like, "Now I want you to read the feat again." And they read the feat, and they're like, "This feat is ridiculously powerful." I was like, "Yeah." Because the top part of the feat was actually not just good, it was incredibly good. And then because it made sense, I can't even remember exactly what it was doing, but because it made sense, there was like a flavor texty thing you could do.
Sure. Yeah.
Also in certain situations that was tacked on at the end as a ribbon. And even this game designer who are used to analyzing things thought that it was weak because it had that at the end. So often case, you actually have to remove something, making it strictly weaker. Not having the ribbon made, which we did remove after that, made the feat worse than, or weaker at least. Worse is a subjective word. Weaker than it was before, but it seemed much stronger because it didn't have that ability. And people don't know what a feat is worth. They don't know necessarily what your book is worth, but they do know that if there's something in there and they don't want to use that part of it, that they think they're not getting the full value. They're like, "Well, I'll never use that last sentence in it." So, and that is one of the 5 things the feat can do. So clearly it's only at 80% bandwidth, when really maybe that was going in for free because it was so small. So the same thing happens in game design too.
Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I had an experience like that. And I'm trying to remember what in the world it was. It was that exact same thing where it was, what was it? I think it was something in Monstrous Heroes where there was this little extra ribbon thing, like you said, that was put in there. And that was making some people say that it wasn't good enough. And at first I was like trying to argue with them, like, no, the main thing is great. That's just like an extra bit that's on the class feature there. And I think from designers and writers, it's almost trickier to trim things down and not go too far. It's almost harder to stay right within a reasonable word count than to go over the word count and to overdo things. I think the tendency is to overdo. Maybe that's just because you have a lot of ideas that are kind of gushing out, or
well, we never overdo things.
You're like jam packing everything in there.
We never overdo things to roll for combat, right, Mark?
Sure, Steven. Never ever.
Except every time.
Except for that's why what should have been one book about dragons became 4.
5.
It was like half of a Hanukkah.
Oh right, 4, right. It was well. Was I wrong though? How good are these books?
They're really good.
They're so
Stephen,
good.
but we weren't necessarily prepared to have
No,
them
we
turn into
weren't.
4 books.
But they're so good.
They're really good. I like them.
They
I'm
came
very happy
out-
with the final result.
Dude, they came out so nice. You have to admit. And how much art. But that's the thing. You have to admit. I not that I'm rewarding you. Everyone wins because the people buy the books. If I'm going to add more content and make you work and add more writing, I at least add way more art and way more coolness to the book. So
they're always great from it. It's just we're not always ready.
No, but we learned.
So I felt it very much when Esper said people like to write more, and sometimes you want to cut it, and other times maybe that special ribbon ability actually was cool, but people won't understand that it was being added for free, and they will think that they had to pay some kind of power budget for it, and so you have to cut it, even if it wasn't too many words, just to make people not feel like they wasted power budget on something they wouldn't use. Maybe a new RPG system can come out that has little slots that like say this is a ribbon ability, where it's like, okay, at the end of the feat there's a section that says ribbon, and it may or may not exist. And if anything is in here, you should understand that the game designer gave this for free to the feat. It was not part of its power budget. It was just for fun. And you can feel free to cut it if you want. And they might even cut it. But the feat before that point is considered to be balanced with any other feat that does not have the thing at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So
it literally, as you were talking about that feat, in my head, I saw the text box and like the little black header of, whatever. Power, and the power is this, and then I don't know, flavor extra
or ribbon. I think that's what some of the D&D designers called those things.
Yeah.
So we do have to. Wow, this never happens. We're always the ones. It's always the guests are asking us to stop. But actually, I'm asking the guests to stop because it's been 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Steven, you never do that.
I know. I got
I'll
things
just do
to
the face from the thumbnail.
I know. Well, you know what? Actually, I know the face. To be fair, actually, I didn't get any sleep last night.
That's fair.
I only got like 4 hours of sleep, so I'm really tired. And I've been working. I went to sleep. Ugh. You know what happened, Mark? So, okay, I'll tell you a little more interesting things. Don't bring up heists. I'll start going down heists. Is that in China, there's a huge holiday coming up, and they basically close for like 3 weeks. So you have to get everything done now. And I'm trying to get the fairy book done. And there was a misprint on one of the pages, like a big one, Mark. So I'm actually having to redo the signatures. So China literally wrote and said, hey, could you stay up and like approve these now? So I had to stay up all night working with China. And so I didn't go to sleep till 2 a.m. And then I got up at like 6 because I couldn't sleep.
Okay.
So
well, let's let Steven let Steven sleep. But it is really fun talking with you, Esper, about game design. I can talk about that more than about like bands or some of the other things Steven sometimes talks about, or 80s movies.
Well, okay, you can come back on the show and we can. This doesn't have to be we do this every week, man. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. If you want your channel to work, I'll leave you with this one story. Mark, you've never heard this story. You have to be consistent, and you have to never, ever stop for the rest of your life. And I'm not kidding. A long time ago, this was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I went on vacation. And I was doing this was actually a podcast, but it's still same way. I was doing my podcast, and my podcast came out every week like clockwork. We never missed a week. And I went to, where'd we go? We went to Dominican Republic for 2 weeks. Now, I wasn't going to do my podcast. I wanted to be on vacation. It's Christmas break. I'm in the Dominican Republic. Doesn't have the best Wi-Fi. So for 2 weeks, I didn't do the podcast. And when I came back, it might as well have fallen off a cliff. And I couldn't believe just missing 2 weeks, like tanked the amount of views for my podcast, and it took a while to come back. And ever since then, I never, ever, ever miss. We did miss this time because Christmas was on a Wednesday, but we did a New Year's show, so we missed 1 week. And I think on a Christmas,
we literally missed Christmas. I don't think that many people would have watched it.
I think that's
the key
okay.
is if you miss unexpectedly
1 week, I think, is fine. But
if you miss
that's
unexpectedly and people don't know that you're going to miss, and especially if it's a longer hiatus, you can lose people pretty easily. Whereas if they know and it's for like a holiday or some obvious reason that they weren't going to be watching it necessarily anyway, then it's not as big of a deal.
And I did a secret show on Friday last week, which I left you alone, Mark. You didn't have to do that one. It was just me and I don't know, you probably saw that. It was me and Derek. So at least I gave everyone 2 shows last week to make up for the one that I missed. So secretly, I actually tried to make up for the missed show by doing
Honestly,
2 shows.
Steven, the thing I am most surprised by is when you throw something with no fanfare at a random time that no one expects it, that still a pretty decent number of people come to see.
Yeah. I was surprised too.
Compared to other situations for live
But it was
YouTubers.
very clickbaity, the topic, though.
Usually you can't just do a live thing
I know.
at some random time and have that work, but it does.
Jenny D always takes off January, by the way. And also, she's big enough. And these are all topics, Professor Dungeon Master. Who's on right now? Look at that.
Yeah, he just sent a super chat and said, Frank Zappa, rule number 1, never stop. Rule number 2, keep going.
You never stop. Yeah, he knows. Professor Dungeon Master and I know you can't stop. Like he's saying, oh, I do this when I'm sick. I do this on vacation. Mark knows I'm on vacation. I'm in Copenhagen, and I'm doing everything. And I'm still answering emails. I'm still chatting on the Discord. It's like you can never stop. I mean, it's just if you're gonna do this,
Steven is helping customers who have questions or issues
constantly
when he is literally in Europe on vacation. And I know I saw somebody in the chat earlier who said that they were really impressed by Steven's customer service. I can't remember who said it, but somebody did say that.
I also make a big point about customer service too. I have some background in that, and I am a very strong believer in excellent customer service.
Yeah, well, I always check out, at least I help out for the people I can. I do have a warehouse, and they can take a few days just because they're a warehouse and I don't control them. But they're good. Once they get to you, they might take a day or 2 to look something up, because also when you're dealing with the things people ask me are like, change my email. That's easy. But the things they'll be like, where's my shipment? That might take a few days to find out, because we got to literally call them FedEx and talk to them and stuff like that. So, but anyhow, yes, Professor Dungeon Master and I, everything he said in that video, I basically have slowly over 2 hours reiterated in this one. It's like, you just have to keep going. You have to do the mix of what you like to do and what other people like to do. You have to be you have to pay attention to what's doing well. And, if things aren't doing well, don't keep doing them, man. Like, it's like, don't expect it to magically start doing well. Like, if you're like, I'm going to do a 10-part series on some esoteric aspect of D&D culture, and those videos are doing terrible, don't expect them to start doing well. Okay. They're just not. So, or accept that they're not going to do well. Like, say, okay, that's fine. I'm doing them for me. I'm not doing for anyone else. And that's fine. But then don't be surprised if you're losing audience, because if you're going to do something for you, then there's an audience of 1. So,
right. So we'll let you sleep, Steven. Should I do the outro?
Do you have anything to say, Esper the Bard? I like your name, Esper the Bard.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on, guys. It was great getting to know you, and asking questions was really interesting. And Mark, are you on Discord?
I am.
Is he?
All right. Yeah. So I'd be really interested to ask you a few more questions and chat again at some point. Yeah.
As I said, we do this every week, so you can come on the show. I'm always looking for guests, so if you want to do another one, probably not next week. I already have someone for next week. So, but cool. In a few weeks. And if where are you located in the country? You're not on the East Coast, are you?
I'm in Kansas. I'm in the very middle of the country.
Wow, that is definitely not near us. So, oh well, if you went to Page, you could have hung out there. Kansas, wow. I haven't been to Kansas a long time. I drove across Kansas once. It's very flat. I remember that. So,
it is.
Joined the role.
Though not as flat as many others.
Oh no! Trust me. I drove to Chicago.
Florida,
that was like
Florida's pretty flat.
Yeah. Florida's really flat. But yeah, join the Roll for Combat Discord. That's actually the easiest way, because we're always on there. And Mark lives on the Discord. He's It's quite attentive there. And
Right on.
I saw you are the 1% of commenters on Reddit, Mark. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah, I'm on. Well, Steven,
Yes.
I can thank you for that.
Oh, what? Really? How?
Yeah,
Why?
I can.
Why?
I am on the top 1% on the Pathfinder 2 subreddit.
Oh, because of all your Ask Me Anything.
Because of the Ask Me Anything that are considered official business with for Roll for Combat that we do. Like, Heizo wouldn't let me do Ask
true.
Me Anythings where we talk about things and products, but also game design stuff. But you do. And so that's something I really appreciate, and that all the subreddit always tells me they really appreciate. And
Yeah.
I'd be in top 5% without that. Let's be clear.
No, yeah, no.
I wouldn't be in top 1%.
You must like that little badge. I was impressed. I was like, ooh, that's nice. It's like nice to have that little badge next to you.
Yeah.
Is there one above that? Is it like the 0.1%?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Oh, you got to the top. Well, there you go.
All right. So everybody, until next time, if you want to battle the zoo, you have to roll for combat. Take care, everyone.